On this last day of Black History Month, I want to begin this reflection on the promise of the Olympia Brown UU Church with the words of Benjamin Mays. Mays served as president of Morehouse College and was a mentor to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and an advisor to President Jimmy Carter. He says, "The tragedy of life doesn't lie in not reaching your goal. The tragedy lies in having no goal to reach. It isn't a calamity to die with dreams unfulfilled, but it is a calamity not to dream. Not failure, but low aim is a sin. Not failure, but low aim is the sin." The reading Patty shared with us earlier from Henry Nouwen is in a collection of essays titled "The Impossible May Take a Little While." It's one I've mined for years, although I'd never noticed that short gem of Nouwen's until just a little over a week ago. I imagine this is a bit like the old Buddhist saying that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Nouwen's words prompted me to remember something I hadn't thought of in years. A day when I was looking for a part-time job while I was in seminary. I had driven out to a home where a disabled man lived with his mother. She was looking for someone to help out so that she didn't have to carry the load all by herself. So we walked through what I would need to do. I talked with the man, helped bathe him. And while I tried to be game, the woman saw me more clearly than I saw myself. This was work I was not well suited for. I didn't like acknowledging it then, nor do I now. I remembered then how deeply rewarding it had been to complete the circle by helping bathe my father in the weeks before he died of pancreatic cancer, drying his hair with a towel, hopefully with a little less vigor, but with all the love that he had as he dried my hair as a young boy. But that act of love did not mean this was an occupational match for me. None of us can do everything. Over the last months, I've asked you several times, although I acknowledge that more context and framing would have been helpful, what you see the work ahead will be for you as a faith community. This is a question your next settled minister can help you with, but it is not one as fabulous a match for you as I'm sure they will be, that they will be able to answer alone. Ministers serve communities and can help provide needed leadership, but the faith community is ultimately you and yours. And if all of that seems a bit too open-ended, let me provide a bit clearer focus now with these questions, which I am sure Reverend Marlene Walker and in her 2.5 years as your interim minister spent some time with you on. What is your history? What have been your successes? And what parts of your history feel like warts? What successes have meant the most to you? What misses have stung the most keenly? What hopes are the most widely shared, the most deeply held? What dreams of yours are the most precious? And who are your neighbors? And what are the relationships you want with them? All the same, and especially during this time of pandemic, grand schemes often go by the wayside. This has been a time when simply striving to get by has been its own measure of success. The future, especially a clean, concise sense of one, can be hard, if not impossible, to pin down. It can help to look back in order to consider what the next chapter, the next seasons may hold. That's why I asked you to let me know when you've been the most proud of being part of this faith community. What was sent in response was heartfelt. I hope you will be as moved as I was as I share some of the responses that came in with you now. But let me say before I get to them that most often I will not be identifying who wrote what, who said what, because in many ways it simply doesn't matter. The first, while looking for a spiritual home for my young family, our young family in 1960, I'm amazed that we found the Universalist Church of the Good Shepherd, that little downtown church we had passed hundreds of times as we drove down the road. Its liberal concepts freed me from the dogmatic creed I had left behind. This beloved church and its members became my moral compass. East, west, north, and south, whatever the life-altering directions I've taken. And though my chosen path challenged inequity and prejudice, I've felt comfort and am happy here. I know that I'm trusted, needed, valued, worthy, respected, and even loved. And I'm incredibly thankful for that. Next entry. I'm proud of building institutions that have benefited my children. I expect Maria Montessori's concepts that nurture the child's natural creativity, love of learning, sense of wonder, and independence. I remember teaching the Egyptian pharaoh Akhenaten's religious concept of one sun god that made this young ruler's brief reign different from the other multi-theistic pharaohs. It was good to move beyond the Egyptian stories I knew from Lutheran school of rigid pharaohs and a wrathful New Testament God, the plagues and those 10 commandments with the 4 shalt nots and the 4 thou shalt and the 6 thou shalt nots. I'll always remember the receptive faces of the little ones looking up at me at the little worship services I planned for them in the rented beery bar basement room at the Danish Brotherhood Hall. We sang relevant songs from the Beatles, Judy Collins, Joan Baez, and a Malvina Reynolds song, Let It Be. When you walk through the forest, let it be. And we'd talk about peace, self-respect, community, and nature. The next entry. One of the times I've been most proud of Obuck was when the youth empowered in the struggle, yes, students, from the Voces de la Frontera, were staging a hunger strike in downtown Racine in support of passing the Dreamer Act. Our church community really stepped up to support those young people. Members shared pillows, sleeping bags, and blankets to keep the students warm in their tents during the day that were set up across the street from Monument Square. At night, we opened our church, this space here, for the youth to camp out in the sanctuary. Several people were chaperones and helped problem solve minor communication glitches. When the hunger strike was over, others brought nutritious food and beverages down for the young people. A week later, we hosted space for a debriefing meeting in the George Bray Hall downstairs and sponsored a potluck meal provided by our community. It was a hugely appreciated effort to provide solidarity to those young people. Next entry. There were so many times I felt proud to be a member of this church, but the one stands out happened in late 1989. Tony Larson and Craig Matthews decided to have their commitment ceremony in the church on a crisp November evening. Barbara Jo Sorensen, our first ministerial intern, performed the lovely service, and the congregation was 100% supportive as the couple took their vows. The church was packed to standing room only, and the applause and cheers at the end were deafening. It was a truly joyous occasion for Tony and Craig and all of us. And the next, this is from Jim Wilbur. He identifies his role in the church. And I'm afraid I have this only on my little screen, so bear with me now. My apologies. Jim writes, I've been thinking about this, and I've come to the conclusion that when I have been the most proud of our church didn't occur on one day or because of a single event. Instead, the pride I feel about Olympia Brown has been the culmination of the now nearly 8 months I have served as board president. Although C and I have been members of OBUC since we moved to Racine in '92, and although I have had one other term on the board, 2 terms on the Committee on Ministry, and headed the Personnel Committee for several years, I really didn't know what an incredible group of people we have as members and friends until now. I alluded to this in my recent Unifier piece when I wrote about the Good Shepherds, and as great as they are but one group of people that make us what we are. I am humbled by the commitment and service I have witnessed from those on the Settled Minister Search Committee to the members of the Board of Trustees, to you and to Marlene and Brenda, Leanne, and the rest of our staff, to the guys with the hammers on the Property Committee who keep our buildings in repair, to the incredible work being done by those on the Social Justice Committee, to our senior youth group for their work on the food pantry, to the music and musicians who make services beautiful, and overall to the 75 to 100 people who show up on Zoom each Sunday to share their hopes, fears, and faith with us all. Everyone should have the opportunity to be board president, if for no other reason than the experience of really learning what OBUC is, has been, and will be in the future. We are blessed, and I am proud. Jim. Thank you, sir. And our last entry is the most succinct. I was most proud of being part of OBUC when we put up our Black Lives Matter banner. When it was torn down again, we put it up again, higher. Love that. The Olympia Brown Church has long considered itself a beacon. This is a perfect example of just how true that has been. And now I need to say something that has 2 sides. On the one side, no one can afford to rest on their laurels. And, well, there is pride to be taken in achievements, and you have every reason to be deeply proud of this church. And this year of pandemic, like I said before, simply struggling to get by can be considered a success. But in the time to come, it will be time to dream again. Now, I also want to say one thing. In the life of any person, the life of any couple, the life of any community, there are differing seasons. In the first congregation I served, Livermore, California, about half the size of Olympia Brown, we worked hard on building expansion projects. And when we finally restored our worship space and built 2 new buildings and had dedicated space for our youth group, they no longer had to meet in the minister's office. Everyone was happy. But once that work was done, after 7 years of planning and dreaming and fundraising and construction, what was next? The answer became readily clear. It was time to rest for a little while. So for a year we did. No new projects, no grand worship arc, no new adult ed classes. We took stock of one another again and enjoyed the new space we had created. In my work with you this year, this strange, socially distanced year, I haven't pushed, pulled, or prodded as I thought I would need to at first. It was clear to me early on in my time with you that the work needed wasn't that. And in conversation after conversation with fellow interim ministers across the nation, those conversations have underscored that our work is different this year. So, what I want to say to you is to take the questions I posed earlier to heart. The work that Reverend Marlene began and I continued isn't finished. What is your history? What successes have meant the most to you? What misses have stung the most keenly? What hopes among you are the most widely shared, the most deeply held? What dreams of yours are the most precious? And lastly in this list, who are your neighbors? And what are the relationships you want with them? What I know is that this faith community has a heart 3 times the size as I expected it to be. And I did not expect your heart to be small. Never underestimate the depth of care and love among you. Don't ever, please, don't ever sell yourselves short. Hearkening back to the story Leanne told us earlier, you don't have to steal it. That bag of acorns is already in your hands. Each of us may hold a forest in our arms. All of you together, that's forest after forest after forest. And that's a story I can't wait to hear. Thank you, one and all. Amen.